Your official salary is 850 euros.
A little less than 1,000.
I'm a president.
It's not a political party, it's a gang.
What is this if not censorship?
This is not censorship.
All these media sources are banned in Moldova for no reason.
I do not think that this is censorship.
Can you protect democracy with non-democratic means?
When you buy people's votes, this is not democracy.
Aren't you violating the law in this case?
I know what I would do.
Maia, we always wanted to meet a leader like you, a liberal politician who became a president in a turbulent, corrupt state. After winning the parliamentary elections, you embraced the power and the opportunity to lead your country to a brighter future. Have you managed to build a beautiful Moldova with a future? If yes, how did you do that? If not, then why? We would like to discuss this with you today, and not only that. We'll talk about internal policy a bit later. First, we would like to talk to you about the war. Thanks to our French colleagues who filmed President Macron at that time, we know how he received the news about the war. They were filming him before and during and after the night of February 24th. How did you spend night of February 24th? Let's recreate it.
When I found out that the war began, I could not believe it until the very last moment that this was possible. It is hard to believe that we are witnessing this war in our continent nowadays. We held a Security Council meeting right away. All the ministers and other responsible authorities assembled together and started developing the future strategy based on the war that had started in Ukraine.
But how it happened exactly? Were you sleeping at that time?
I woke up at 4 in the morning. I could hear the explosions here.
The explosions?
Yes. So I woke up, read the news, and started calling my colleagues, of course. I was in my office by 6 in the morning. Then, I believe it was 6:30 a.m., we held the first meeting and started developing our strategy. First, to ensure the safety of our people. Secondly, on the first day of war, we had Ukraine refugees arriving. So our strategy had to be mainly focused on providing support.
I'll be asking a lot of follow-up questions. Who did you call first?
I called the Minister of Defense and the Prime Minister. So, yeah.
Who among your colleagues from other countries called you first, or did you call any of them?
Well, I don't remember exactly. I received a lot of calls. I can't remember who called me first. We had immediate contact with Romania, and we discussed what was happening. And
I'm about to ask a hypothetical question. I really hope you'll be sincere. Have you ever thought about President Zelensky's actions on February 24th? And I mean, have you ever thought about what would you do in his place? Meaning, you are a president and your country's being attacked by a powerful enemy. You're located in the capital city, and there are saboteurs operating around the city. There are clashes all around, and every country in the world offers you, a leader of your state, a safe escape route. And Zelensky chose to stay. This was recognized as an act of courage among people. Have you ever thought, I mean, not on that day, I mean a year later or 2 years later, have you ever asked yourself or thought of what would you do in his place? I mean, God forbid.
I know what I would do. There is only one right choice, it is to stay. You're responsible for your people. You're responsible for their safety. This is the only right choice. There can be no doubt about it.
Even if you know there are firefights in Chisinau?
Yes, even if...
Again, theoretically.
You are a president. You were selected to ensure safety, to protect people. People look at you. You must stay to do your best to protect your nation. Let there be no doubt about it.
Are you being honest?
I'm being honest.
When was the last time you cried?
I can't remember. Well, I guess I cried when I watched a documentary. You see, there are Moldovan reporters making documentaries in Ukraine. They interview people, they even film at the front line, so they made a documentary about the war in Ukraine. I watched it, and I cried at the premiere.
Was it out in the theaters?
Yes, it was. The documentary was out in the theaters.
What's the name of the documentary?
I can't remember the name. I think it's called The Road to War, Irpin, or something like that. Two Moldovan reporters were, or rather, they happened to be in Ukraine on February the 24th, in different places. One of them was in Odessa, the other was close to the front line, and so they shot this documentary. I think it was then when I watched this documentary, it was the last time I cried.
There is a former hotel in Chisinau. It's called National. You can see it when driving from the airport to the city center. As far as I know, in the beginning of the war, the building was painted in Ukrainian flag colors. Then it was painted in a way that the colors were reminiscent of St. George's ribbon colors. Then they painted it into neutral colors. And now, quoting my colleague, Russian reporter Ilya Azar, who wrote an article about Moldova 2 years ago for Novaya Gazeta paper, but I believe it's still relevant. So he wrote, "The hotel looks like an abandoned battlefield where neither of the two armies define the winner," end of quote. Is it true that among people in Moldova there's no common opinion about the war?
You should know that the people of Moldova, our people have helped the Ukrainian refugees. Let me remind you that almost 1 million refugees have entered Moldova. There are 2.6 million people in our country, and 1 million refugees was a lot for us. Some of them stayed for a few days, some of them stayed for the weeks and months. 100,000 Ukrainians are still here in Moldova. Keep in mind that our people never had any problems with refugees. On the contrary, people greeted refugees with open hearts and open doors. Our government did not have enough resources to help so many people. Our government couldn't have helped so many people. We simply didn't have that many resources. In the first months of the war, no less than half of government officials have worked hard to help Ukrainian refugees. It was the people who helped. People have shelter to refugees they met the first time in their lives. They invited refugees to live in their homes. What I mean is that our people and our society have been and are still helping Ukrainian refugees. So let there be no doubt about it. We all agree on this. We are united in this regard.
This is true. I know it from my colleagues. I mean, Ilya Azar mentioned in his article that 90% of the refugees stayed at people's homes, not in hotels or places provided by the government. People let them in.
They stayed at people's homes, yes.
Yeah, it's true. I'm asking about something else. What I mean is, there's a huge gap between the victims of the war and refugees and those who people support. Do you mean that pro-Russian Moldovans are...
What I'm saying is that Moldovans are peaceful people. The majority, the vast majority of our people does not support this war. I mean, there are people who believe the Kremlin propaganda. However, Moldova is a peaceful country. Our people want peace. They do not support this war. This helps us to protect peace and stability in our country.
I've heard that Ukraine, after the war had begun, it was apparently when Ukrainian army gained the upper hand on the battlefield. So Ukraine offered Moldova to resolve the issue circulating around Transnistria.
We have never heard such official statements. We've heard people mentioning this statement in mass media. However, I declare to you with all due responsibility, this statement was never officially addressed to us.
How about unofficially?
Unofficially as well. This war was never addressed to us by state officials, and we've declared it time and again that Transnistria issue may be resolved only through peaceful negotiations.
Meaning,
only through peaceful negotiations.
What if they offer you, kick out the peacekeepers from Transnistria? What would you say to that?
We will not agree to use the military means. Negotiations only. We would only accept a peaceful solution.
Tell us how things are going with the ammunition depot at Kabasna. There is a town in Transnistria where at Soviet times they kept loads of ammunition. And in the last couple of months, or in the past month, rumors have been circulating that since Ukrainian army is currently experiencing shell crisis, they might attempt to capture this depot in order to use these shells. Have you heard anything about it? About the depot.
It's been there since Soviet Union times. Due to separatists' regime in Transnistria, the legitimate officials can't verify the current state of things there. We can only guess. OSCE visited this depot many years ago and provided their evaluation. Since the day one I became the president, we've been trying to resolve this issue together with Russia. We suggested destroying the ammunition supplies stored there. Russian Federation was open to this conversation, but we have not agreed to anything in the end. And this is obviously an issue. However, Ukraine is not planning to gain access to this ammunition supplies. This is because Ukraine respects the territorial integrity of Moldova. Ukraine would not do anything like that.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Moldova, Mikhail Popshoy, said the following about a month ago, and I quote, "Real Madrid invests in their defense more than Moldova invests in national army." End of quote. I counted the costs of 4 primary Real Madrid defensemen. Their cost will appear right here. It's about 120 million euros. How close is this number to Moldovan national army spendings?
Well, we spend around 0.5% of our GDP on defense. I guess this would be the lowest percentage among all European countries. We have increased our military spendings, but there is still a lot of work to do. On the other hand, Kremlin keeps promoting their propaganda, saying that Moldova is a neutral country and therefore should not have defense industry whatsoever. This is wrong. It's quite the opposite. Neutral countries are investing more in their defense industry to be able to protect their people, meaning we have increased our military spendings. We are also receiving support from our partners. Still, a lot of work needs to be done in this regard. This is different in Russia. You are spending almost 6%, Russia is spending almost 6% of GDP.
You're free to say you. I'm a Russian citizen.
Russia is spending almost 6% of their GDP on military expenses, while we're spending 0.5% of our GDP. We're increasing our military spendings because of the war in Ukraine, because of Russian aggression.
This is a terrible question, but these are the times we live in. If Russia invades Moldova, would Moldova fight back?
We would do our best to avoid the situation. This includes our desire to join EU This is first and foremost to protect our people, because EU is a guardian of peace. However, according to the constitution of Moldova, we must do everything we can to ensure peace and ensure the protection of our people. This is the reason why we have an army and military spendings consequently, but we really hope that this war comes to an end soon, so that we're able to focus on economy expenses and other fields rather than defense industry, on which we spend more and more in the current situation.
So it's rather yes than no.
We will do anything to, how do you say?
Protect.
To protect.
What is the biggest inconvenience for you as a president? I mean, like, in your daily routine?
Well, I'd say it's the fact that people look at me 24/7. I mean, when you try to... I really enjoy, hiking. So it means that when I hike, people look at me, evaluate how I look or how I walk. So sometimes I just want to...
This makes you feel uncomfortable.
It does. Well, I'm used to it, but I can't say I really like it. Sometimes I just want to, sometimes I manage to take a few hours off to take a walk, especially when I travel abroad and nobody knows me there. And it's easier to take a walk there when you try to do it here. By all means, it's perfectly normal when you make the decision to become the president of the country, or when you make the decision that, I don't know, you want to get into politics. But I know there are people who like to always be in the spotlight, but there are people who would like to have some
privacy.
Yeah, some privacy. I mean, to have some private time and not have everyone looking at you.
What does it look like? I mean, you have a business trip, for example, to Paris or Brussels, and you take 3 hours off just to take a walk by yourself? I mean, if you have a chance.
3 hours doesn't always happen, but sometimes when there's time, I can walk around, go to a restaurant, have something to eat.
Would you have your security with you?
Well, by law, I should have bodyguards around me, but not too many of them.
Have you had any funny stories related to this? Because, well, you're walking down the street in Brussels or Paris, and you start chatting with someone, and someone asks you, what do you do? And all you can answer is, I'm a president of my country.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Well,
maybe in Starbucks or some other place.
Well, there were some cases. Say, in the evening, you go to a restaurant, you come, and someone says to the waiter, this is the president of our country. And people react to this somehow. Again, they ask, where is your security? How did you end up here? So there are such cases. This place is called Kondrica. It's a beautiful forest, as you can see, and the former president lived here. There's a little house that was built back in the 60s in the Soviet Union, and as I already said, not everyone, but several former presidents lived here.
So you don't live here?
I live in my 2-bedroom apartment that I bought in 2003.
Well, why don't you live here?
Well, because it would mean additional expenses for the state, and I have no reason to settle here. I have my own apartment where I live just fine, as I did before I became president.
Is it about the expenses, or is it because you simply prefer to live in your own apartment?
Expenses are the primary reason, of course. Secondly, I live in Chisinau, which is closer to work, so as not to spend too much time. Well, I believe it's right to live at my home.
Before the 2020 elections, you said you would allocate this residence for social needs. Is that true?
Yeah.
There were different options considered. For example, someone from your team said that there could even be a shelter for victims of domestic violence, and I don't know.
Many refugees lived here, Ukrainian refugees
lived here for some time.
I don't remember, but there were many people who lived here at the time. After that, we were thinking of creating some kind of culture center. It turned out that it is required significant investments, and we decided to postpone it because there are other needs nowadays that deserve investing. Still, from time to time, I invite students from different regions of the country, and we go hiking. I show them the forest. We talk about the need to plant more trees because I'm actively promoting a national reforestation program. Yeah, because our forest area is quite small, and we also discuss other things, of course. Euro integration, for example.
Oh, that too?
Of course, it's important to the youth because they will be the primary beneficiaries of our European integration.
So, before the elections, you said that the presidential palace, the building in the city center, you would also give it away. Like you would, you would remove the fence.
Yeah, we can give away the presidential palace.
4 years have passed, but the fence is still there.
But we opened the gates. You can see now people can come in, people can go out. Again, when we assessed the expenses, that is, we calculated them, it turned out that we would need to spend more on removing the fence than if we just open the palace for the public. When they want to come in, they come in. So we're open regardless of whether they're a fence or not. This is what we talked about. It is important to be transparent, not to isolate our institutions behind fences. And that's what we do. So if you want to go for a walk around the presidential palace and even go inside, you're welcome to do so. Sometimes we organize various events there. People can come during Christmas and see the Christmas tree or take some photos. There were various events where people could just come and see our building. School children come as well, because in that very building where me and my colleagues work, the Declaration of Independence of the Republic of Moldova was voted on. So everyone who wants and can come to see this whole...
Yeah, in general it may sound trivial, but someone may tell you, why would you make promises, perhaps insignificant ones, if you don't fulfill them later?
Well, we fulfilled the promise, meaning everyone can come in. So everyone can enter the presidential courtyard. This is what open implies, remain open whether there is a fence or not. So what is really important to us that the gates are always open. This is important.
You still live in the apartment that...
In my apartment, yes.
Your apartment.
That I had before.
There's even a video interview shot in that apartment before the 2016 elections where you took second place.
Correct.
It's a multi-apartment building.
Yeah.
There are neighbors above you and below you.
Yes.
So, theoretically, there are people who could flood the president, or you could flood your neighbors.
Well, yes, it happened once. Well, it happens.
Did they flood you? Did that happen after you became president?
Yes, after I became president. Well, that's okay.
Do you make breakfast for yourself?
I make breakfast for myself. As for the lunch, my mom brings it to the presidential palace.
Do you buy groceries yourself?
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes my mom buys groceries.
How do your neighbors feel about the fact that they live next to someone who's being guarded and escorted like 24/7?
I don't think it's an issue. I mean, I can say there were major changes. I mean, there's a person on the ground floor who guards the
entrance.
The entrance, yes, but I think it's even better for everyone because they also feel safe. I can't speak for everyone, but I hope I'm not causing any inconveniences. I mean, the fact that I'm president now doesn't cause inconvenience for them. I have very good neighbors. We have a very good relationship with the neighbors.
Do you use a cell phone?
Of course.
Do you have a Telegram account?
No, I don't, but I have accounts in other social media.
Do you make posts in your Instagram account?
Sometimes I do it myself, sometimes my colleagues help me, so it depends.
How is communication between leaders of countries carried out nowadays? Is it always governmental communication, or sometimes it can be messaging?
Not always, no. It's done through various channels. I'm not going to name them, but I can contact a lot of leaders directly. I can text them. They can text me back.
What time do you finish your working day?
It depends.
Well, let's say a day without any special urgent matters when you're in Chisinau outside business trips.
Well, at 8 p.m.
So you come home, what do you do?
I read emails that I didn't have time to read during the day because during the day I have a different agenda. So I read correspondence that it's emails.
Do you have time, for example, to sit back and enjoy some YouTube video? I mean, at work, can you watch some video for entertainment purposes? Or not for entertainment?
No.
Just something important like someone's official statement?
No, of course not. I mean, I read everything I have to read, especially what my colleagues send me when they send all the important news. So I read all of it, but I can watch something in the evening sometimes, but not very often.
Do you receive news reports or do you monitor media outlets yourself?
No, we have news reports, of course, for everyone, but besides that, I read other things that aren't sent to me, of course.
Is there something you use to fight stress? I can imagine that
Hiking, that helps the most. I mean, what helps me to fight stress is hiking, especially hiking in the mountains, and when, it's more challenging when I overcome, yes. Hiking here or in other places helps a lot. 15, 20 kilometers a day works just fine.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Do you hike near the presidential palace or somewhere outside the city?
No, not always. Sometimes I hike here. This place is not that big, but there's a 12-kilometer hiking route. I can hike here in the morning, but in the countryside, you can take longer routes when hiking.
With headphones on?
I tend to hike without headphones because let's hear the
soundtrack is good.
Ambience, yes.
Yeah.
It's a great soundtrack. And so I try to distract myself from everything. That is to listen to nature and relax.
Do you have any favorite music?
I listen to Coldplay. Yeah, I would like to see them live.
You haven't?
No, never.
They toured all around Europe last summer.
Yeah, but I was busy, unfortunately. Well, I hope to see them live one day.
Am I the first Russian journalist that you have talked to since the full-scale war began? Is that right?
Yes, believe so.
Oh, why?
Well, it is what it is.
I think many of my colleagues in Moldova would say that it is because you want to reach out to the Russian-speaking voters shortly before the elections. So what would you say to your colleagues in this regard?
Last week, I think, I had an interview in Russian. That is, here we have journalists who produce Russian language programs. And when I have a chance, I give interviews in Russian, Romanian, and in English.
Let's talk about your presidential term. 3.5 years have passed since your presidential term began. As I understand, you came to presidency with three main promises. Number one is Euro integration, becoming closer to the EU. Number two, judicial reform. And number three, fighting corruption. Again, 3 points: Euro integration, fighting corruption, and judicial reform. No need to talk about Euro integration because obviously it is happening. It's noticeable, it's visible. How would you assess progress on the other two promises?
I would say it's all one promise because fighting corruption can be possible if there is no effective judicial system. Right now we are working on having strong and incorruptible institutions that will fight corruption and, on the other hand, to have effective judicial system. But for them to be effective, first we had to clean up the system, because when I came to power, we came to replace the ones who had seized the power in the state. There were major corruption scandals. I never planned to become a politician, but one day when my colleagues and I saw that in almost the entire political scene, I mean, in almost every political party, there were corrupt politicians. So we saw that they promised a democracy because people thought that politics was only about dirty money that comes from who knows where, and then using this money, corrupted politicians turned into corrupted government. Then we realized that there was basically no one to vote for, and that we had to try to start adequate political parties, or rather adequate political party, because we worked on starting one political party. We did this to demonstrate that there can be honest politicians, to show how to finance a political party legally and transparently. So we started this fight back in 2015, and until 2020, we fought to rid the country of all these corrupt politicians. When we came to power, they left. That is, the leaders of these corrupt structures left the country.
You're talking about Vladimir Pakhotnyuk and Ilan Shor, two of your biggest opponents.
There are others too. They left the country, and then we started the reform, because the president simply cannot declare whether someone's corrupt or not corrupt, or whether someone must be imprisoned or must not be imprisoned. And since the power over the state was seized during Plahotniuk in short times, we had a major issue with corruption, both in judicial and in anti-corruption organizations. So we started this cleansing process, because first we need to clean these organizations from corrupt people, and then we observe the results. And this cleansing process is still ongoing. Of course, on one hand, the process takes longer than we would like and hope, because there is resistance, because there are people who want to stay and keep taking bribes and make decisions based on the bribe size. And now we have an external assessment of the integrity of judges and prosecutors. That is, we have commissions that include former prosecutors, former judges from European countries, as well as people from non-governmental organizations from Moldova. And these commissions are now assessing judges and prosecutors based on the criterion of integrity. We got rid of some of them, but I believe we'll need another year or so to finalize the process.
A year.
Well, I hope.
Well, look,
No more than a year.
Yeah, let me clarify. I don't live in Moldova, and I'm not in the context, so I should base my claims on some reliable sources. For example, I read an article by Carnegie, a publisher whom we cannot suspect in siding with Russian propaganda, that's for sure. So, they write, the attempts to conduct judicial reform turned out to be clumsy and ended up in new scandals that made Moldovan authorities look incompetent. They failed to beat corruption. There are no more bank fraud scandals, we'll put an overview here, like it happened when the country was ruled by oligarchs. However, those who were involved in past fraud schemes, who built a vicious system in the prosecutor's office and courts, who worked in it and who fabricated cases, were not punished. What can you say about this claim?
Well, there is one case that was closed. I'm talking about Shor case, when court ruled out that Shor had to return the Chisinau International Airport to the state. The concession of the airport was proven to be a fraud scheme. That being said, we have court decisions on the two biggest fraud cases. The rest are still being investigated. The judges and prosecutors are still working on this case, but try to imagine we're conducting a reform and there are people who resist the reform as hard as they can because they realize that they won't be able to provide proper evidence of their integrity. So these people, instead of fighting corruption by investigating these fraudulent schemes, I'm talking about prosecutors and especially judges. So they either delay the investigation or prefer to continue taking bribes. So they don't want us to finalize the reform because this is an internal struggle, meaning you must conduct the reform and be able to demonstrate the results. This is the reason why it is taking so much time. We have to purge them from prosecutor's office and courts before being able to demonstrate any results. It's a complex matter. I'm not sure if you can find an example of judicial reform being finalized in 3 years.
What about Saakashvili's Georgia?
I don't think it took them 3 years. Besides, nowadays, European Union together with the Venice Commission are being very strict in terms of how these reforms must be carried out. You can't build proper state institutions without addressing the law or by doing it illegally. We will pursue. This reform is very important for us. Of course, we have not achieved the results that we have been willing to achieve yet, but according to international ratings, even in terms of judicial reform rating, Moldova has made a significant progress. This is always applicable to all democracy ratings as well. Moldova made significant progress on that front too. For example, when it comes to, say, take freedom of the press rating, for example, Moldova now holds the 28th place in the list. We are even higher than some European countries. We managed to achieve this in 2 years.
Let's discuss the freedom of the press a bit later. Speaking of the progress, last year, European Commission published a report on Moldova. Here's a quote from European Commission report, which was also published by Carnegie. There was no significant progress in the prosecution of high-profile corruption cases and long-standing criminal cases. Low clearance rates and large backlog of cases negatively affect the judicial system's efficiency.
I do agree with this. This is why we're having this reform. There are no clear results in terms of judges and prosecutors. The European Commission report stated that the results of the reform in general are quite good. You can read it yourself. It is mentioned there. Had not they been satisfied with the results of judicial reform, Moldova would not receive a positive decision from the EC, that is European Council, to commence the negotiations with the Republic of Moldova. The statement that we don't see tangible results in terms of judicial reforms and judicial system, the system that we reform, I do agree with this statement. The people of Moldova are waiting for the results of the reform as well. First, we need to purge the system. Then the fair judges who would remain in the system shall demonstrate the results of the reform. Until there are people out there who are willing to support the corrupt system and benefit from it, or who are willing to prevent us from finalizing the reform because want to stay and keep making money, we won't succeed.
Let me summarize. So this is a very common claim that people make about you and your team. Do you disagree about failing the judicial system reform and lack of major progress in terms of fighting the corruption?
I concur that that it is taking us more time than we hoped for initially. However, the reform is ongoing. We will keep pushing it. There is no other way to build our state. This is very important. So yes, we must keep on purging the system. We will see the results once the system is clear of corrupt people. I wish it all happened sooner and we could see tangible results.
You have a Romanian passport, don't you?
I do.
When did you get it?
A long time ago, I guess it was 13 or 15 years ago, something like that.
Why did you get it?
1 million people in Moldova have Romanian passports, meaning European passports. This means there are 1 million citizens of European Union here in Moldova. This would make our way to EU much shorter, must be much shorter, hopefully.
Did you get it were there visa requirements back then?
There were, yes.
Yeah. So was it because of visa requirements or just in case, or?
You see, my grandmother and my grandfather had Romanian passports, and like other people, it was, it was important for me to have a Romanian passport as well.
For the sake of self-awareness.
Self-awareness, yes.
How popular is the idea of unification with Romania in Moldovan society today?
There are definitely people who believe that it is the right thing to do.
But how about statistics?
I'd say it's around 40% or 36, maybe 40. I can't tell you the exact number, but the surveys show something like that. But the majority of people disagree. The majority supports the idea that Moldova should become part of the European Union. And we're working on that. We respect people's choice.
Those who are in favor of unification, what are their motives?
Well, some have...
To join the EU and NATO faster, or because of historical?
Some people respect historical reasons. Some want to join the EU faster. Some become... because the living conditions in Romania are better than in the Republic of Moldova. People have different reasons to support this idea.
Would you like Moldova and Romania to unite?
I believe that the best and most realistic thing for Moldova is to become a member of the European Union. Then we will have no borders with Romania, no borders with other European countries. We will meet with Romania in the European Union.
Okay, what if tomorrow, for example, it's clear that Moldova moves towards the EU, but what if something goes wrong? Imagine if there is a referendum tomorrow, people vote for the unification with Romania. What would you vote for?
We will have a referendum on European integration. I will vote for European integration. I promised this to the people and I will do what I promised.
The president of National Bank of Moldova is a citizen of Romania. The former Minister of Finance of Romania, Anca Draga.
It's Drago.
Drago, excuse me. How come? Is it because...
Because we needed a good specialist in this field. Are
there no such specialists here?
There are good specialists. There were no people who wanted to work in this position. And, other countries sometimes invite specialists from abroad. For us, the most important thing is to have the right policy of the central bank, especially since we had problems in the past, because some corrupt and fraudulent schemes prospered in Moldova financial sector, and back then the central bank did not do what was necessary to prevent it. So for us, it is very important to have the right policy of the central bank and to have qualified specialists and honest people in charge of banking system.
Yesterday,
it could be someone from another country, not just from Romania, meaning we are open to specialists from all over the world.
Would you invite a specialist from Russia?
Well, as long as this person is qualified enough to meet all the criteria, just like specialists from other countries. Again, our doors are open for good specialists and for people who are willing to work for this country.
Some members of Russian rock band B2 asked for Moldovan citizenship. I would assume their applications will be approved.
I have not received their applications yet. If the documents are fine, their applications will be approved.
How does the procedure go? As far as I know, they don't have Moldovan blood in their veins.
Well, no, but the law allows us to issue citizenship in special cases without them, people having Moldovan blood. As you say, if their applications are vetted by responsible parties, then why not?
What are the criteria? I mean, if we put it simple, will the granting of citizenship to certain individuals be beneficial in terms of state's public image?
Yes, if we talk about valuable, talented individuals, someone we respect, like in this particular case, we do respect them. So I hope their documents are fine, and I'd be glad to sign their citizenship applications when it's done.
What will they have to do in return?
Nothing. They would have to respect the interests of our country.
I mean, they won't have to live here. They would become tax residents only if they live here.
Well, yes, if they live here, if they have, I don't know, well, yes, basically that is if they live here or if they run a business and so on.
Do you realize that after this case, many public figures fleeing the war may actually start thinking about...
Sure, each case will be considered individually.
You're making room for opportunities.
There you have it. You see, we were talking about the central bank director, a specialist from Romania. In case of B2, we have talented people from Russia. We're open to all nationalities in this regard.
Is there censorship in Moldova?
As I've told you already, it's not our subjective assessment, but rather an objective assessment reflected in international ranking. In terms of international rating, Moldova has skyrocketed over the last 2 or 3 years. That is, if I'm not mistaken, from 18th position to the 28th.
But rankings aside, in the last 2 years, dozens of media and TV channels have been blocked in Moldova. Moreover, as I understand, the majority or even all of them were banned without a court decision. What is this if not censorship?
This is not censorship. This is not about media outlet. This is about means of mass disinformation. I don't agree with you that ratings don't matter. I think this is an objective assessment because the people who studied the means we implemented to facilitate the environment for a free press to develop, they properly assessed what is happening here. There is law, and these, whatever you call them, let's say media, when they do not comply with the law, then of course you have to take action.
As I understand it, the question is, these media belong to oligarch Ilan Shor, the one and only. Ones that got banned, I mean. Anyone who wants to, who's not within the context of Moldovan politics, they can watch the interview by Alexei Venediktov, and it becomes clear, no need to immerse in the context. It is very indicative. In this case, I understand that Shor is a pro-Russian oligarch who represents the interests of a state that is waging war against your neighbor. That I do understand.
The one who works to destabilize our country.
But I read local experts who live in Moldova who don't like Shor as much as you do. I read the following, I quote, "The decision of the CES, that is the Commission of Emergency Situations, violates the right to freedom of speech, believes the expert on constitutional law, Victor Katan. The aforementioned TV channels criticize the government, which is normal in a democratic society. In turn, the former judge of Moldova at the European Court of Human Rights, Stanislav Pavlovsky, believes that the decision of the Commission is incompatible with the provision of the European Convention on Human Rights." End of quote. It is not just them. Many of my colleagues who also treat Shor as you do say that all these media in Moldova are banned with no explanation. What would you tell them?
Do you agree that everyone should comply with the law, that the funding of the media should be transparent, and that the issues that our laws are based on, international standards, everyone should comply with the law? When illegal funds are used to finance these media when they're financed.
Is there any proof that the money is illegal?
We have plenty of...
After all, these channels are banned without a court decision.
These channels were banned based on...
By a commission.
Yes, the commission, based on the conducted analysis that involved the council that deals with audiovisual content.
TV and Radio Broadcasting Council.
Yes.
Audiovisual. Okay. Look, I'm from a country where laws are adopted and constantly revised in order to restrict freedom of speech. And there is one example. I mean, in theory, if you ask Putin, what is the matter with foreign agents? Why all of a sudden there are people in Russia who become more and more deprived of rights day by day? He will say exactly the same thing. You have to comply with the law.
Do you believe that illegal funding and what you're talking about are the same thing? If you think that these media were banned because they criticized the government, then I suggest you watch or read any available media after the interview. You'll see that there's enough media sources that criticize me, and
I see. They criticize you.
Yes, and the government. So this has nothing to do with their views. You can talk to representatives of free media who work on regional level. They can prove that they are free media sources. But these people, I'm talking about media sources that try to spread misinformation to destabilize the country. Literally 2 days ago, they tried to import $1 million into our country to finance such media.
Is it the one shot at the airport?
This is illegal, and all these things happen in order to destabilize the country. This is not democracy. This is corruption. And we must be very, very clear about what is legal and what is illegal. Everyone must obey the law.
Look, here's the thing. You say that there is a lot of criticism. So is there any opposition channel or big media source in Moldova that may criticize Maia Sandu and do so on a frequent
yes.
basis? Can you name them?
Well, all of them. Pretty much, I mean... Yeah. You can.
My colleagues won't agree with you and those who sympathize with you.
Well, we may, after the interview, we may sit down and I'll show you the videos from the last 2 weeks where the media sources criticized me or the government.
TV channels too, not just the internet?
Yes, TV channels as well, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Maybe after the interview, one of your assistants may send me the name of the media source where they criticize you, and TV channels as well.
Every day on the daily basis, this is normal.
One of the last...
Sometimes they're fair, sometimes not, but it's fine. The issue is not whether they criticize or not. It's normal to criticize. It's not normal when it's illegal, when the money that was stolen from people is used to misinform this very people.
In March 2024, you talked to journalists, and a journalist from the Fifth Channel, which I'd assume is also owned or associated with the fugitive oligarch Shore. So she approached you with a question. You had an emotional conversation, and after some time, correct me if I'm wrong, the channel was banned.
No. It has nothing to do with it.
No, I'm talking about the timeline. Hold on, please. I'm talking about the timeline. I don't imply cause and effect.
I can give you many examples when people asked these questions and nothing happened to their employers. The only thing I asked her was, I asked if she knew who was paying her salary, whether she knew who funded the media she worked for. And I believe that
the channel replied,
decent journalist would know where their salary comes from. I am sure you know where your salary comes from. The channel, yes. good. And as a reporter, you should feel comfortable about the source of your income, be that source A or source B. But when journalist does not know where their salary comes from and who funds their agency, they stop being journalists. So
The Fifth Channel, after that, the Fifth Channel replied that they're making money on advertising. So
That's not true.
So they're not honest.
That's not true.
When I spoke to my colleagues...
She said it herself. She had no idea.
Yes, I saw that too.
I believe that...
Well, I should say it happens.
Let's say a journalist, agrees to work for some agency. They should first ask, who are you? Where's the money coming from? Makes sense, right? Because you represent someone and you don't want to find out one day that your salary consists of the money that was stolen from your own parents and from the Moldovan people.
My colleagues who told me, and well, they keep telling me that even, again, we're talking about colleagues whose political views opposite to the agenda that the short channels broadcast. They told me, and it's not just one person, that the ban of these channels is nothing else but censorship. Are my colleagues lying?
I disagree. This may be their opinion, but I disagree. Again, if you analyze or if you ask them to analyze what all the media sources write about the government, about the president, and if their analysis is objective, they will see that everyone can say what they think, say what they want to say. Let there be no doubt about it. Right now, we can open any page of any agency or media, and you will see everything there. They criticize ministers, the prime minister, the president, and so on and so forth. All this alongside positive statements as well. And as I said, there are international reports that are way more objective. Speaking of corruption, we know how they tried to monopolize all the media in the country in the past. If you talk to those people, I mean, if you talk to the free press representatives now, they will tell you how these oligarchs dealt with the free media, and they will tell you for sure whether we do have they will tell you whether we do have freedom of the press
media
or not today.
Well, I can tell you their answer because I spoke exactly about this. And their answer would be the following. First of all, there are still independent media in Moldova. But these independent media, the majority of their financial sources, since the advertising market in the country is small, in most cases they are funded by Western grants. In this regard, I think of two things. First of all, some journalists, when they see how the media is being pushed, even the media that belongs to shore, they somewhat develop, self-censorship. Because they see that the media in the country can be banned by an emergency commission without any court decision. And secondly, they develop self-censorship because they realize that Maia Sandu is the president who supports the West. And since they're financed by Western capital, if they criticize you too much, who knows what might happen to their financing? Because Maia Sandu is, that way they'll make people who give them money unhappy, basically.
Once again, I recommend you to open any web page today and search Maia Sandu and see for yourself how much positive and how much negative content there is.
Okay.
Because we've been talking about it for too long. You should read it and see for yourself what the press may write about the leaders of our country.
Meaning there's no censorship in Moldova?
No. There is no censorship. There is a problem with media who do not comply with the law and with those who want to destabilize our country and create risks for our national security.
In Moldova, in addition to Shore's media, a lot of Russian media are banned, ones that broadcast the official standpoint of Russian officials. Is that right?
Some of them, yes. but we are guided by European standards and principles. But you must know that sanctions were imposed by the European Union, and we come along what was decided by European Union. That is, we stick to the decision of the European Union on this matters.
How do you feel about this? For you, is this ban...
Spreading disinformation is a bad thing, and again, propaganda and disinformation is used to harm our country, to harm our democracy. Of course, we can spend a lot of time discussing how to fight propaganda more effectively, but I believe that the decision of European countries, this approach that was agreed upon works for us as well.
But is there such thing as partial censorship? I mean, it's either there or not. I mean, how do you define what's propaganda and what's not?
Let me ask you, how much money does the Kremlin invest in propaganda?
Billions of rubles.
So how do we fight this? How can our small country fight such huge propaganda machine in which billions are invested?
I don't have an answer, and I'm aware that making decisions
for a solution.
On this subject, this is one of the reasons why I was never interested in politics, because here you have to make some decision, and both options are bad. You can do nothing, which is obviously harmful to your state because people who are being pumped with tons of money by a rich state say stuff that most of which is harmful and has nothing to do with the truth. But simply banning all of them
means
censorship, and this means that you're choking those democratic values that you're fighting for and which are dear to me as well.
Again, if you turn on the TV tonight, you will discover a lot of TV channels. In Russian, you can watch all these channels, but when it comes to the propaganda that promotes war, that proclaims on daily basis that war is good, that what Russia is doing in Ukraine is good, I do not consider it censorship. When these sources are banned, I believe it's bad for democracy and for our peaceful future in general.
So you believe this doesn't violate democratic values? I mean, I fully agree with what you said.
Democracy needs to be protected, yes. I agree with you that there are no reliable solutions and we're still looking for these solutions, but we cannot simply close our eyes and say that allowing propaganda means freedom of speech, because you yourself said that billions of rubles are invested in this propaganda in Russia. How do we fight it?
Can you protect democratic values with non-democratic means?
We're building a democracy here. If we go back to freedom of the media subject, you should read what Reporters Without Borders wrote, because you will believe them more than me, probably. And I recommend you to read what they say about Moldova and our free media. And we will fight for free media, for freedom of speech, but we need to preserve our democracy. We're trying to learn from countries that have more experience, democracy-wise.
Your official salary, if converted to euros, is 850 euros,
Yes,
more or less.
something like that. A little less than 1,000.
According to your income statement, you have savings. Well, you nearly
ran out of savings, yeah.
So, do you live on your salary?
Of course. I'm not the only one who lives on a salary that is less than 1,000 euros. Of course, we all want the salaries to rise. That's why we work hard. We're building a stronger economy, but we still have to work.
Okay, for example, if you need new hardware, like a new Mac computer, that costs 1,500 or 2,000 euros, so you save up for it.
I have a computer now. I mean, I'm not saving. I don't need money for a new computer, but I like other Moldovans can live on this salary, of course. We would like our people to have bigger salaries, but still have to work hard for this to happen.
When you worked in World Bank, you were making 10,000 euros a month.
Oh, yeah, a very big salary. And the fact that...
I'm sorry, is that before or after taxes?
After taxes,
Net.
of course.
Net.
Yes.
Okay.
So the money I earned allowed back then me to start a party, because now I do have a salary. But back then when we created the
You used
party,
your
I
own
had
money.
no salary at all. Yes, for several years I had no salary at all because the party had no money to pay salaries. We created the party and we had only one person who we paid a salary. And of course, the fact that I had these savings helped me a lot. Other party members worked as volunteers, and of course, the fact that I had these savings helped me a lot.
Moldova remains a fairly poor country. Why so?
Well, there are different explanations. Corruption is one of these explanations. The fact that we failed to create a strong state, the fact that we had corrupt officials at the head of the state, just as we discussed previously. There were multiple corrupt entities, and whether people's rights were respected or not. What I want to say that corruption is a very big problem for democracy. What these corrupt people want to do is to use democratic means to come to power and destroy the democracy, because we have already seen this when the power over state was seized. Therefore, we need to solve this problem. We need to demonstrate results, of course, but also to preserve what we have and not allow these corrupt groups to come back to power and then destroy our democracy. There are many people, many problems that need to be solved. Many people have left the country. This is also a problem because young people left, as well as people who could participate in the fair development of state economy.
Is it true that in the last 4 years, the amount of active young people who've left, well, I mean, so-called active population, it's people up to 45 years old. So is it true that about 88,000 people have left the country?
I don't have this exact number, but we're aware that in the last 20 years, almost a million people have left the country. This is a very serious number. And some people come back, but unfortunately, due to the war, not very many people want to return home now because they believe that they won't be able to feel safe here. In order for more people to return and to ensure that young people don't leave, we need to work hard to improve the quality of life in Moldova. The integration into the European Union will help to bring back these people, at least partially, and to make people believe in their good future living this country. But again, we need to finalize the judicial reform issue first. We need to improve the quality of education. We need to improve the quality of healthcare, etc., because people want to live in good conditions.
Correct me if I'm wrong about the quality of life. Moldova's GDP in 2022 decreased by 5%.
By 6.
By 6, okay. In 2023 was increased by 0.7.
In the first quarter of 2021, it was increased by 14%, and our forecast for 2022 was 10% increase. But then the war happened and it decreased significantly.
There's a fairly common complaint addressed to your team. We already mentioned what happened to Moldovan economy after the war had started and what happened to it exactly. But there are two other countries who provided asylum to Ukrainian refugees, that being Georgia, where they had 10.1% increase in 2022 and 6.1% increase in 2023, and also Armenia with 12.5% in 22 and 8.7% in 23. Why did they have such economic growth while Moldova did not?
Well, it can't be compared. I cannot say that it can be compared because the conditions are different. We are very close to Ukraine. We had bigger impact. Energy resources have become more expensive. Major changes occurred. We had a lot of trade with Ukraine, and all of this stopped in one day. We had to find other markets. We had to buy raw materials in other countries, meaning for us, the war became a more serious obstacle in terms of economic development than for other countries.
I've heard the complaint that, well, not a complaint, but a reasoning, whether it was possible to attract, in case of Armenia and Georgia, people were fleeing from the war, leaving Russia and Ukraine, and basically brought hundreds of millions of euros to these countries.
People came, Ukrainian refugees came to us, of course. These people did not come with money. On the contrary, we tried to help them, but in order for us to have a strong economy, it is important for us to reform the judicial system too.
As far as I know, there were people who were willing to relocate their business to Moldova from Ukraine, from the Odessa region for sure. Did you create favorable conditions for them in this regard?
We're trying to create favorable conditions for everyone, and all these reforms that we have ongoing, we are investing in infrastructure, we're fighting bureaucracy, we're trying to debureaucratize state institutions. More than half of the state institutions are, digitalized?
Institutions? Digitized.
Yes, digitalized, meaning we are working on it, but still, due to the fact that the war is happening close to us, we cannot attract investments in the way we could have if there was peace, of course.
How would you assess the level of political competition in Moldova in 2024?
The level of political competition in Moldova in 2024 is high. We have a lot of political parties. It is very easy to create a political party here. When we created a political party, it was very difficult because the conditions were harsh. It was almost impossible. We created our party when the power over the state was seized. It was very difficult. When we came to power, we changed all the conditions, and now a group of people, if they want, they can start a political party. Meaning all those who want to engage in politics are free to do so. The only thing is that they must comply with the law, and especially the law of financing political parties, because the big problem of corruption that the Republic of Moldova faced when happened due to the fact that political parties did not comply with the financing law. They were financed with dirty money. These quote-unquote investments were used to provide power and further facilitate corruption. So
how does this law define whether money is legal or not?
Legal money must be declared. We have clear rules on how much can be invested. In fact, before we created the party, people did not participate in financing as they do in normal democratic states. Let's say there were people who had large sums of money. Sometimes they stole this money from the state, and then they financed all these political measures to make it to leadership positions and to further facilitate corruption. When we created our political party, we were the first who when we created our party, I stepped forward and said, in order to create a party, we need your help. And people were astonished. They said, you want us to make donations so you can engage in politics. People did not understand at all how political parties are supposed to be financed. So when we started the party, there were very few people who agreed to help us, especially because Plahotniuk was there and economic agents were afraid to talk to us.
Yeah, the situation has changed. What about now?
So we had people who worked in state organizations come to us, and back then even retired people came to us and made
For example,
donations.
what if you live abroad? I mean, in theory, like Roman Abramovich, a citizen of another country, can he provide sponsorship?
There are limitations. I don't remember the exact number, but I think it should be no more than 100 euros if sponsored from abroad, because there is a large Moldovan diaspora. These people actively participate in elections. They are very active, and in the law, we made adjustments so they could participate, but be able to donate a relatively small amount so that no one can influence political processes. When we talk about democracy, we should start from the question of how political parties are financed.
Look, here are several cases related to political competition that surprised me while I was preparing for the interview. Igor Dodon, your opponent in the 2020 elections, was detained on May 24th, 2022. His house was searched early in the morning. He got accused of 4 offenses. But May 24th is your birthday. It reminded me of something that happened in my country. How do you interpret the fact of his detention on your birthday?
You'd better ask the prosecutor's office about this. I was in Harvard on this day when I read about it in the press several hours later because I was in a different time zone. I asked myself how come and what this means, and since then, we haven't heard anything about this case. The prosecutor's office is in charge of this case, so why did this happen on my birthday? Why is there still no progress on this case? We should ask people who, the people who
what do you
started
think?
this case, what they tried to.
Is that a coincidence that it happened on your birthday, or maybe someone wanted to curry favor with you?
I don't know. I can tell you, but it doesn't look good. And yes.
All right.
This is unprofessional. I mean, for law enforcement agencies, for the prosecutor's office, which should work and earn credibility.
Credibility, yeah.
To gain people's trust, it certainly looks unprofessional.
Here's another thing. December 2021, Belzi, as I understand, the second largest city in Moldova, elections for mayor are held. Marina Tober wins round 1 by a wide margin. She's a close associate of the aforementioned fugitive oligarch Shor, one of your opponents. Before the second round, she's withdrawn from the elections because she didn't declare how she fed the activists who helped her in the election campaign. The numbers differ, but it's somewhere around several thousand euros. It's a fairly small amount. They withdraw her, but this, I mean, right before the second round, someone who was obviously winning, lacking, I don't know, 2 or 3% to hit 50% of votes, gets withdrawn. Isn't that...
When you buy people's votes, this is not democracy. If you don't believe it, they just return from Moscow and try to bring $1 million into the country in one day. In one day. What they did back then, what they do every day, they buy people's votes. What they do is not democracy, and we cannot allow them to continue this corruption, because that's what they did in the past, and what they want to do now is they just want to have their political power back this way because they can't do it any other way. They can't step forward and say, we can do good for Moldova. We can make the Republic of Moldova a member of the European Union. All they can do is manipulate using money and buying votes.
What do you mean buying votes? Do they buy individual votes or bribe those who do the counting?
They buy individual votes.
All right, okay, I see. So how much does a vote cost?
It depends. Last time it was 50 euros and 100 euros.
For 50 euros, a person votes for Shor's assistant.
Of course, they work
Who managed to...
they work with people who have low incomes, and they try to...
Who actually proved this?
Everyone proved it, meaning...
No, not at that time. I'm talking specifically about these elections. I'm aware that Shore has a well-deserved reputation, I'm fully aware. But specifically at that time, the person nearly won, then she got removed. Who proved it?
Yes, of course.
Was this a court decision?
Yes. The court made it in time, the police collected evidence, and the Central Election Commission made a decision. Based on the court decision, Central Election Commission banned her from the elections.
As I understand it, following the court's decision, she was charged for not declaring catering for her...
Well, there were many different things.
Activists?
Now, there is another case ongoing related to the elections in Gagauzia. Again, there were instances of undeclared money usage and vote buying.
That is when Evgenia Gutsul won, is that right?
Yes, this case was transferred to the prosecutor's office. I think it was sent there today or yesterday.
Evgenia Gutsul became the leader of Gagauzia, a girl without a biography who joined the election race a few weeks before it began. So the whole election campaign was held under the banner of Shore, that is your opponent. So she became the president, the leader of Gagauzia. And by law, you must approve her as a member of the government. And you still haven't done this.
No, I haven't. Let me tell you why. You're talking about elections, local elections. You can count how many political parties, that is, how many political parties' representatives won local elections, meaning all those who complied with the law, all those who financed their campaign within the legal framework. All these people were able to win. You can check at these results, because what you're saying about this political party or about this gang, because it's not a political party, it's a gang. First they start one political party, then they start another, and so on. Our democracy should be judged by what is happening country-wise. It should not be based on several isolated cases where corruption and vote buying are taking place. And that is the problem with corruption again. Vote buying.
But why don't you appoint her? You don't believe she won the elections fairly?
Because today she represents a corrupt group of individuals. She doesn't represent Gagauzia people. She represents a corrupt gang. I don't believe such people belong in the government. It's against the interests of our country, and it's a risk to our state security, if you will.
Well, that's your opinion, but there is a law that states... that was a fair win. At least mathematically, the elections were fair. And the law states
Honestly, I disagree with you. I disagree with you that these were fair elections. There is a case ongoing.
So you don't approve her position because you're waiting for the investigation to end. Aren't you breaking the law in this case?
Well, they filed a complaint with the Constitutional Court. Let's see what the decision will be.
No, the other thing. The fact that you don't approve her position in the government, aren't you violating the law?
I think I'm not.
Well, don't you think this mindset may lead to, if we're being geeky, so to speak,
I can't.
In essence, anyone can say this. Any citizen may say that I don't follow this law.
I can't appoint a person who represents a criminal and corrupt group of individuals.
So, based on this, you're choosing to break the law.
I don't say I'm breaking the law.
It implies that anyone out there might break the law. Why not?
No.
You cannot use violence against people, but I will...
The law doesn't state how fast she should be appointed. Let's see what the court has to say.
Is it true that during your presidency you've not had a single meeting with Vladimir Putin?
Correct.
Why not?
Well, because there was nothing to talk about.
Wait, what about before the war?
No. There were different things that we discussed, but we never got to the point of arranging a meeting. Nothing like that.
Did you communicate via phone or correspondence?
Not really. We never had a personal conversation, but there were issues that were discussed between governments at the governmental level.
So you didn't want to meet, or he didn't want to meet?
This matter was never discussed.
Nevertheless, Russia always had close relations with Moldova in one way or another.
Yeah, I understand. This remained at the governmental level. There was no need for one-on-one meetings, so we tried to resolve all issues at the governmental level.
What do you think of him as a politician?
Well, we all know that he started a war in Ukraine, and he can end this war, but unfortunately he does not want to.
Why so? What do you think?
I don't know.
Do you think Putin has any territorial ambitions regarding Moldova?
I cannot say for sure. I mean, based on the information we do not have much information in this regard, but of course we're aware of different Kremlin officials. Some of them even say that Moldova does not exist as a state. We hear things that are disrespectful. There are people who disrespectfully or even dismissively speak of our people, about Moldova, about Moldovans.
How do you feel about it?
We are here to defend the interests of our citizens, and we always act in the interest of our citizens. We want to have good relations with everyone, but it is impossible to have good relations with those who do not respect us, those who start wars, those who do not respect the territorial integrity of other countries. Of course, and this is just impossible.
I don't understand much about politics, but look, you say that there was no reason to meet with Putin, but at the same time you met with Dmitry Kozak.
He came here, we met, yes.
Uh-huh. But wouldn't it be more effective to meet with Putin as leaders of the two states?
Well, Kozak came here, and I met with him, and we discussed the issues that we had at the time with the Russian Federation.
Would you have had to come to Russia and meet Putin yourself?
I don't know. This was never considered. We haven't talked about it.
In Moldova, there was a gas crisis in 2022 when gas prices skyrocketed like 10 times.
Almost 10 times, yes.
Yeah.
Well, 7 times, I'd say, not 10 times, but almost 10 times.
But why did it happen?
Well, first of all, gas prices increased all over Europe. You might remember that. On the other hand, when the contact with Gazprom ended, we had just come to power. We did not have alternative sources. This is a good question why, for 30 years, the former governments could not open or make it so that there were alternative sources of gas and electricity. In this regard, Gazprom told us that they did not want to extend the contract because they wanted the government to take on a debt of $700 million. This debt, as they said, was the debt of Moldova Gas, a distribution company in Moldova where Gazprom is the majoritarian shareholder. They told us that we had a big debt, although this debt is not of the government. This debt is of the company in which they are the majoritarian shareholders. We said that we needed to verify it because we did not know where these debts came from. And we said that we wanted to verify it first. And because of this, we could not agree to undersign the statement that we would return this money. We could not do it because we had not carried out preliminary checks. This would mean that our consumers had to pay not only for the gas, but also for this debt, factoring in the skyrocketed gas pricing. So we hired international auditors, and the auditors proved that the debt was not $700 million, but $8 million. The $700 million debt Gazprom told us about turned out to be an $8 million debt. It's the amount that Moldova Gas owned to Gazprom. So what can we summarize based on this? Of course, we did all we could to introduce alternative solutions so that we can buy gas without being blackmailed anymore, because commercial conditions is one thing, but when people come and say that you have a debt that big, it's another thing, keeping in mind that such debt never existed in the first place.
So what does it mean? That you were being blackmailed or simply punished for not being loyal?
You can call it whatever you want. I give you facts.
Okay, so where does Moldova buy gas now?
The open market.
From Europe?
Yes, from Europe.
Your opponent, Igor Dodon, says that Moldova keeps buying Russian gas with the help of third parties.
We buy gas on the market. We buy gas for the best price that we can find on the market today, and we can have a choice. That's for the most important thing. What we have done is what was not done for 30 years. We now have a choice. If the price is good on the market, we buy it there. If the price is good on another market, we buy there, depending on the conditions for our citizens. And now we're creating an alternative for electricity. In a year, we will enter European power supply market. We have already established this connection, but it goes through Ukrainian territory, and every time Ukrainian networks are shelled, we experience interruptions. Now we are building power alliance with Romania so that we have an alternative electricity source. In terms of energy security, we have done a lot in this year, and although it was very difficult because the prices were very high.
You said that PMC Wagner is planning a coup in Moldova, or rather was planning a coup, was in 2023. What did you know about it?
I have already made a statement regarding this. The document we received back then contained the name of the PMC, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that they had such a plan and that there were certain individuals who wanted to arrange a coup in Moldova, some sort of coup.
What kind of document was that? Was there just a name? Because in previous interviews, you spoke rather evasively about this.
Well, that's all I can tell you now, meaning the documents...
You cannot say, or
no,
you just don't know the details?
No, I can't tell you all the details. I told you what I could tell you. What I confirmed just now is the only information I may share with you on this matter.
Well, it may seem rather suspicious to some people that...
Suspicious that they were planning the destabilization of the state of the Republic of Moldova, that they wanted to sponsor riots and protests that would have eventually led to bloodshed on the streets?
No, that sounds logical. Without details, it sounds a bit like you're trying to scare people with Russia. There are countless things in Russia that you can scare people with, by all means, but...
Do you think someone else could have tried to?
To do this?
Yes, to do this.
I think that there are politicians who, for their own benefit, may simply say a fact that cannot be verified. That's what I wanted to say.
For
it
us,
makes sense, but it cannot be verified.
Not beneficial from political standpoint, because each time we talk about these destabilization plans, it goes against our economic goals. That is, it is important for us and we work to ensure stability. But on the other hand, we must tell our people about the risks so that they do not participate in such things that may do harm. People can protest in this country. People are free to criticize and protest. We talked about this the first part of our interview. I'd recommend you to turn on the TV in the evening and watch any political show. You will see representatives of the opposition, different experts, and you will hear a lot about me or the government. Moving back to your question, peaceful protests are perfectly normal, but when people are being used the way to do harm. It becomes dangerous for them and imposes risks to the state as well.
Well, you say that this goes against your interests, but it can also prove to be beneficial when there's such a thing as an external enemy.
Instability. This brings
Having
instability.
an external enemy can mobilize the nation, especially...
Instability cannot be beneficial. On the contrary, stability in the country and preservation of peace have been our main priority since the war began, and this remains our primary task. And we will do everything to preserve unity, stability, and peace, because security is the most important thing for us at the moment. Economy is important, reforms are important, no less. However, security comes first right now.
On the eve of our arrival, it was not very calm at the airport because the security carried out thorough checks of people arriving from Moscow after a forum. What was the reason for this?
They were checking the very people we talked about earlier. The issue we have covered already. I don't know why we spent so much time on it. Moldova is more than these struggles with corrupt groups. They tried to bring in large amounts of money, more than $1 million, I believe, so they could use this money later to finance illegal political actions. However, it is forbidden by law for any state to finance any political actions in Moldova.
How does it... Even Romania?
Yes.
Romania cannot do that?
Romania does not have any political parties here. This group of individuals has been doing this.
How does it work on practice? Does it mean that 100 or several hundred people go to Russia, and each of them, by law, they may bring no more than 10,000 euros without declaration?
Yes, they send people weekly, and people travel.
So people come and go like money mules, or...
This is one of the methods, because they also use cryptocurrency. They try to use different methods to bring dirty money here, either to finance protests or to finance the spread of disinformation, but we've already discussed this, or to simply rig the elections and buy votes they need. So by all means, it is done to provide financial support to people whom they use for their political purposes.
Still, de facto, people are permitted to carry 10,000 euros without declaration, correct?
Yes, but we have reports from CES and Anti-Corruption Bureau, or whoever is dealing with this matter. They provide the source and evidence that the money is they're illegal.
Was it confiscated?
I believe so, but when it comes to the trial, law enforcement agencies will be presenting evidence to the judge. So to speak, to present to the judge.
All right, but how legal is this? You see, the reason I'm asking this question so often because you often speak of Euro integration and of EU as a place guided by marvelous values, which is true. But the EU has another side, because the core, the fundamental basis of these values is insane bureaucracy and its consequences. By the way, this is what many people hate about EU, especially people who moved to EU before the war or after the war began. I'm talking about those who left our simple yet unperfect worlds. So there, if I, as I see it, please correct me if I'm wrong. So if I cross the border having 10,000 euros with me, I won't be violating any law unless I start funding everyone around me.
Yes, in the EU, it is not allowed for political parties to be financed by Kremlin. I can
imagine that.
That's what we're talking about.
But hold on, I saw these videos. People were detained at the airport
There will be a trial. All this evidence that the law enforcement agencies have collected will be provided. We'll see it will be sufficient, but this happens every day. They try to bring money into the country through different methods and sources. This is illegal. Yes, it is difficult because on the one hand, we are carrying out a judicial system reform. As I said, there are significant issues because the reform is happening while there are judges who would like it to stop, they want it to fail, and they are not interested in doing their work very honestly and being transparent about what they do. But there are also people who do their work honestly. Because of this, it is more difficult to fight against dirty funds and what these groups are trying to do. But on the other hand, we are working hard to reform our institutions of power, and on the other hand, we need to preserve our democracy. Because if we let dirty money enter our country, it becomes obvious how harmful the consequences will be.
One more thing about the elections. As I understand, it will take place in October. Is that right?
Yes.
I mean presidential elections.
And referendum.
Yes. So, on one day, presidential elections and a referendum on Euro integration will be held. Is it true that a year ago it was not legal to hold two such events on the same day?
No, the Constitutional Court did not state that it was impossible.
Well, some law had to be changed.
The law, yeah, but it was not prohibited by the Constitution.
But some law was changed.
Yes.
And after it happened, this issue came by.
The law has not changed, and there are no problems with it. Moldovans can make two important choices on the same day. For us, it is very important to have as many people as possible participate in the referendum because the decision on Euro integration is probably the most important decision, not only of today, but also for the next few decades. I very much want more of our fellow citizens to participate in this referendum and make their decision. They have to decide.
Well, look, I mean, to people outside the context and to people within the context, as well as to people like me who are outside the context, those who are not fully aware yet are able to analyze the situation. So for us, it may seem like a pretty clever or maybe even cunning political move. Because by all means, there are citizens of Moldova who support Euro integration, but who, for example, are disillusioned with how your team has worked.
There will be many people participating in the presidential elections.
Yes, but...
So they can vote for whoever they want.
They will go to these elections, they will come and vote for Euro integration. At the same time, they will know that Euro integration is at stake, and therefore they will have to support Maia Sandu, and they will be forced to vote for you. And this really looks like a smart political move. It'll give you more votes because your name is associated with Euro integration in Moldova. And if I vote for Euro integration, that I will vote for you because there is no other way.
Moldovans are smart people. Please don't make it sound like they don't understand that they have a choice. Euro integration.
It's not about being smart, it's about the choice.
It's either Euro integration or how come this is an absence of choice. There will have enough room for choice. There are other candidates who promote Euro integration, and there will be candidates who stand against Euro integration. People can choose. They're smart. For us, it is very important that this referendum happens as soon as possible because we are starting negotiations. It is very important for us to resolve this issue because there are pro-Russian politicians in Moldova who say something like, why are you working on Euro integration? This is a project of the current government. You did not ask the people. Now, when we say, okay, fine, let's ask the people, because we have reached a very crucial point. We're starting negotiations. We will have to carry out a lot of reforms and transformations to move forward on this path. And it is vital for us to let people speak to prevent these talks that this is not the choice of the people, this is not the choice of today's politicians. For us, us, it is important that the people make a decision as soon as possible. For us, it is very important to have as many people as possible to participate in this referendum. We know that the highest level of participation is during the presidential elections. So if we want all the people or as many people as possible to participate and make this decision, the presidential elections seem the most appropriate thing to do. The most right time, probably.
As far as I know, there's a bill under consideration, or maybe it has already been adopted in parliament, to make it possible to vote even by mail.
Yes, there's a pilot project. Moldovan diaspora is quite big. Many Moldovans who live abroad will participate in these elections, but unfortunately for those who live in large countries, it is more difficult to create proper conditions for them because they have to travel several hundred kilometers to vote to the embassy, for example.
To the embassy?
Yes, to the embassy.
As I know, this project includes the following countries: the US, Canada, Iceland, and several European countries.
There are specific criteria.
Russia's not on the list.
There are specific criteria. They have been discussed in Parliament. And once the decision is made, as I understand, the law will be sent to Venice Commission for approval. Then we'll see how it goes.
Russia's not among the countries where it'll be possible to vote that way.
There are specific criteria based on which the list of countries is formed.
No, I mean, I read it in several sources. It's the US, Canada, Iceland, some European countries, and that's it. Why is Russia not on the list? Moldovan diaspora in Russia is
because
quite
it
big.
does not meet the criteria.
Which criteria?
I can't tell exactly either. Well, you need to study the criteria to say for sure.
Again, I'm talking about how it looks from the outside. I don't claim to have a deep knowledge, but the logic here is, well, it's very simple.
I repeat myself. To make sure there are no open questions left, the Parliament will send this law to the Venice Commission, and we will have an objective overview of...
Let's imagine the following. Suppose the Venice Commission says, okay, in this format, it is possible to vote in these countries. But then again, it also looks like a small, but still a tiny bit of help to Maia Sandu, because these countries that are listed there now are the countries with a Western diaspora, which, as I understand, traditionally sympathizes with you, because they pretty much live in countries with values that you represent: European, liberal, democratic. But from Russia, where obviously people...
Do you believe that nowadays it is possible to trust Russian postal services? That it is possible to create proper conditions for...
I think it's disrespectful. Or do you believe that Moldovan diaspora is also to blame for Putin's crimes?
I believe that all Moldovan diaspora is Russia should have proper conditions to vote.
Well, if you ask me, then either none of them or all of them have to vote.
This is a pilot project. Next year it will be for everyone, but this year it is still a pilot project.
Based on what we discussed, we talked about freedom of speech, we talked about political competition and the upcoming elections in Moldova. In our editing team, a very small team, by the way, we share one opinion. I mean, all of our team members agreed upon it. I don't know if you followed the politics in Russia in the 90s. Probably not, but nevertheless, for us, this is a very important part of our history, which possibly led to where we are right now. Since our opinion formed in our chat group, let me read it to you. This is a quote. It's basically a conclusion to which we came based on the research and preparations we did. There is a strong feeling that the current situation in Moldova is reminiscent of the elections in Russia of 1996. A popular candidate, a Democrat standing against the backdrop of Soviet leaders, fails liberal reforms in the first term and fails to increase the quality of life. Not because he was a corrupt politician, but because of his own and his team's lack of experience. His popularity sharply decreased, but in order to be elected for a second term, his entourage resorts to not the most honest methods. Somewhere they restricted the freedom of speech, somewhere else they introduced propaganda. When it came to opponents, they shaped an image of an enemy from a terrible past. They wished for the best. They didn't want to go back to Soviet Union. The candidate won and realized that such methods can be used in the future. One tiny bit won't hurt the democracy much. Plus, he did it for the country, not for himself. We know how it all ended in our case. To put it simple, the democracy isn't in power. The Democrats are. Would you agree or disagree with this comparison? What is your opinion?
Let me tell you something. Here in Moldova, we faced a lot of problems for the past 30 years, but we managed to preserve our democracy. We protested on the streets as often as it was necessary because we knew how important it is to preserve democracy, how important it is for us to remain a free country. We managed to do this. Yes, we still have a lot to build, a strong democracy, to build proper institutions of power in our state. This can't be achieved in a year or two, but if you look at our history, we were able to preserve our democracy, and I think that some countries should learn from us. And we will continue to do this. Sometimes we go out onto the streets. Sometimes we show how to create political parties the way it should be done. And I have been to many villages. I still go there and talked to people. People keep asking, why haven't we brought order to the judicial system yet? They say we're being too democratic. We explain to people that everything needs to be done by lawful means, because if we try to do something differently, this won't be right. The fact that we are working so hard to become a European country proves this. For us, first and foremost, the EU means security, and secondly, this route will ensure that we'll be able to continue our work and consolidate our democracy. We're a freedom-loving people, and we have been demonstrating this for all these 30 years. True, sometimes we succeeded, sometimes we do not succeed, but we will continue this pursuit because this is our only way and we believe in it. And yes, there are still many problems that we need to solve. And yes, because of the corruption, the issues we faced in the past, it is very difficult to reform some organizations. Because of the war, it is very difficult to build a strong economy. We do have major problems. We did not have a strong economy before the war in the first place. We do everything we can. We do our best to improve the business environment, but when there's war waging next to you, it becomes problematic to attract investments that will enable us to create more job opportunities. We've faced a lot of ups and downs. However, Moldovans remained freedom-loving people. And all these years, we've been doing everything we could to avoid the establishment of authoritarian regime here. It won't happen since we're building a democracy in our country. And again, I highly recommend you to go outside and talk to people, talk to Moldovans. They will tell you whether they feel themselves free in this country or not, and whether this matches with what you've read a moment ago. The European Union is the only way for us to be able to consolidate our democracy.
Do you have a dream outside of your occupation?
To have some rest and sleep and go hiking for 2 weeks.
You have been to Machu Picchu. Do you have any other peaks of your dream, aside from...
Well, I really like the Romanian mountains because they're fairly close and the nature there is marvelous. True, they're not very high, but still you can spend good time hiking there. Well, I cannot say that I want to go somewhere in particular and try to climb very high. I would just like to take a 2-week vacation and have rest.
How long does your vacation last normally?
Well, recently I had a week off last year.
Do you have a dream related to your occupation?
Of course, for Moldova to become a member of the European Union. As soon as possible, then I'll start sleeping better at night.
What if, in October, people vote against the integration? Would that be it? I mean, Moldova wouldn't be joining the EU in that case, or are there any other ways?
According to the polls, people are going to vote for European integration. It is up to the people, of course.
But technically, let's say we'll be 58 against 42. And that's it. The matter is postponed until what?
If people make this choice, this will mean that the process wouldn't go as it is now.
But it won't stop the integration.
I don't think it will stop, because in any case, people will understand that there is no other way for us to feel safe and to be able to do more for our country, more than what we have done for the past 30 years, because we saw how it was. We worked hard, but we didn't succeed in everything. Right now, we see how the countries that became members of the European Union have developed in the last 20 years. The difference is immense, very big.
During the interview, I remembered a lot of things that happened to you during these 3.5 years, and there were quite a lot of either controversial moments or rather complex ones. You admitted this yourself. But the impression I have from our conversation is, we were talking more about some external circumstances, that if something went wrong, it was because of some external factors. Was there anything that went wrong because of you and your team?
Well, the fact that
Did you make any mistakes?
The fact that we underestimated, of course, everyone makes mistakes. In our case, we underestimated the resistance that our judicial reform would face. We underestimated the resistance that we would face when we started these reforms, meaning we hoped that we would achieve the results earlier. But the process turned out to be much more complex and requires more time.
Is this the only mistake?
Well, this is one of our biggest mistakes.
My final question. I have a quote prepared for this one. When I read and watched and listened to and communicated with people about their lives in Moldova for the past 4 years, well, not 4 per se, but when I was plunging into the context, I heard the following from several people. They said this, so I made a summary. I made this quote as accurate as possible to make sure it fully conveys the original message. Here goes. I voted for Maia. She managed to beat oligarchs who ruled Moldova for many years. It was very cool. I had high hopes for her. But almost 4 years later, my only emotion is disappointment. The quality of life has not improved. Whether we live in a lawful and democratic state, well, I have more questions than answers with each day. End of quote. So the people who said that will definitely watch this interview. What would you like to say to them?
First of all, I'll say it again. We promised that the country would be governed by honest people, and we fulfilled this promise. It is true that the oligarchs are not in jail yet, but the fact that they do not govern this country and do not continue to steal money as they did several years ago is probably very important. It is true that we still need to work hard to take back what they stole. It is also a serious matter. We have worked to build a stronger economy, but let me remind you of the energy crisis, followed by the war. Then there was the refugee crisis. What I want to say that all these struggles that we face are only because of these external factors. But still, this is probably the most difficult period for our country. If we look at the entire history of the Republic of Moldova, on the one hand, we have made major steps towards Euro integration. And this is important for everyone because all our citizens, all Moldovans will live better much when Moldova joins the European Union. It's not just now. There have been talks about the integration since 2005. Romanian was the president back then when the parliament voted for the integration and set the course to the EU. However, it is during our time the first major steps were made in the direction, making room for negotiations. We'll still have a lot of work to do on the front.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.